Hello out there, all you beautiful people in YouTube land. This is Loudmouth Reviews, and I'm joined here with my 2 cents guy.
Hello there. This is my first time being on your show. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And first, I'm going to start this stream off with a bit of a riddle. What is something you simultaneously do not want to have and also don't want to lose?
I feel like this is one I should know, but rather than pontificate, why don't you tell me?
A criminal indictment.
Touche.
Yes. And certain people in the general YouTube sphere are kind of dealing with criminal indictments, as we know, because there was a massive scandal that broke a few days ago involving a company called Tenet Media, a media company, I guess, that kind of distributes like advertisers to certain channels and that are within its kind of sphere. And it was run by Lauren Chen and her husband, and it ensnared a few big a few like really big players: Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, Lauren Southern, and I think a few others.
Benny Johnson.
But Benny Johnson, yeah, as well. And it's been turned out the Department of Justice has said that the entire thing was funneling money to the Russians, that Lauren Chen and her husband were knowingly funneling money to these to promote Russian interests.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to say up front, I do want to be clear, a criminal indictment is not a conviction. Just because someone is indicted does not necessarily make them guilty. So I will do Lauren Chen and her husband the courtesy of saying I am in position to say with certainty that this indictment is true. However, what I will say is this. A lot of the people who are defending Lauren Chen and her husband are saying, oh, it's obvious the Justice Department is just making this up because she's a threat to the establishment. She spoke out against Israel, and now, the Israeli masters want her shut down. And I guess where I'm coming from is, I certainly believe it is possible, and I certainly believe the Department of Justice has the means, and has in the past even, fabricated indictments in order to shut down media sources that they disagree with. However, I find it very, very difficult to believe that Lauren Chen represented such a profound threat to the establishment that she just had to be taken down. I mean, is Lauren Chen popular? Sure, among a certain segment of online viewers, but she, in my opinion, does not have nearly the amount of sway over the American populace that she would represent a true threat to the media, such that they would have to fabricate something like this to take her down. Could that be the case? Sure, it could be. But I personally find it very difficult to believe that the Justice Department would go to such great lengths to take down someone with Lauren Chen's footprint. It just doesn't strike me as plausible.
Yeah, and another thing is people are saying, oh, it's just a recommendation for an indictment. And technically they haven't actually indicted Lauren Chen yet. Like, she's not like in prison or out on bail or anything like that. They kind of they actually indicted like 2 certain Russian operatives, and they tied him to Lauren Chen, but I can't imagine them not eventually indicting Lauren Chen and her husband over this, because she's at least the indictment alleges that she's guilty accused of being guilty of some crimes of money laundering and being an unregistered foreign agent, and the maximum sentence for those crimes is up to 15 years in prison. So that's a very, very serious issue. It's not like a speeding ticket. And the Justice Department does not tend to issue statements. Once they issue a recommendation for an indictment, it means they have very, very solid evidence for a conviction. Like, the amount of people indicted by them who end up being found not guilty is pretty low. It's like 5%.
Definitely. And again, I will say, in principle, I believe that the federal government would fabricate evidence against someone to shut down their voice if they represented a true threat to the establishment. However, again, given Lauren Chen's footprint in American media, the amount of reach she had, I find it very difficult to believe that Lauren Chen was such an important truth teller, such an important exposer of government corruption, that they just had to shut her down lest she expose the corruption of the federal government. I find that very difficult to believe. I find it much more plausible to believe that, yeah, they really do have significant evidence against her, and she very well may be guilty. Again, I'm not in a position to say she is guilty. I don't know. But for all the people who are defending her, saying the Justice Department is just trying to silence her, that does not strike me as plausible given who she is.
No, it doesn't seem very plausible at all. And what is it? And the main thing, yeah, like Lauren Chen has always been kind of a light in this arena. If you remember way back in 2016, the entire reason she became famous in the first place was because she got a malicious copyright claim by Lacey Green, at the time much bigger channel, who everyone on the kind of right side of the YouTube sphere hated, and that kind of drew them to her channel. And of course, the other big and very obvious advantage Lauren Chen had to attract an audience is her look. She's very, very pretty. And when she went up there talking about how she's being persecuted by a big channel, it activated young conservative men to immediately subscribe to her.
Absolutely. And Darkon, hello.
Hello. Are you talking about the one aspect about roaming millennial that makes you want to propose to her?
Very, very funny, Darkon. We're talking about the recent criminal indictment.
Yes. No, I'm just going to say Lauren Chen is, in my opinion, one of the original trad thoughts, as I've called them. Back around the 2016 era, you had a bunch of early 20s, very pretty young women who created YouTube channels and just basically started parroting conservative talking points. Now, I'm not opposed to anyone who wants to share their political opinions being allowed to do so. However, the reason I call them trad thoughts is Lauren Chen, Lauren Southern, and a number of these others, as time went on, they really went on to show their true colors. They were not politically astute or well-researched by any stretch of the imagination. They were pretty girls repeating conservative talking points, and therefore it got them popular. But as they aged and came into more money, you saw their political positions evolve very conveniently based on who was funding them at the time and what their personal life situations were at the time. So I don't really take Lauren Chen seriously. If you do, I mean, good for you. But I think I'm not willing to attribute to her anything more than being a pretty face who repeated conservative talking points and got famous for it.
To be fair, there was like a pretty good video that she did against the minimum wage way back in the day when she was just purely known as Roman Millennial and before she even got 100,000 subscribers on that YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm not going to say like all her content has been total crap. I mean, some of her videos, particularly, her earlier ones were sometimes pretty good. Other times it kind of just seemed like she was lazy, like she had just kind of like used the bare minimum conservative talking points. And her content wasn't ever bad. Wasn't really that bad. Well, there were a few ones that were bad, but most of it was just kind of very okay. And there were a lot of people who making similar points, but she got more attention because she's a beautiful woman.
Yeah, apparently I need to go transgender or something and do up the face to make it look feminine or something.
That'll get you more attention. It just might not be the kind of attention you want.
Yeah.
Or who knows? Maybe I could have some straight dude accidentally like jacking it to me, like I've heard somebody did to Blair White one time.
Besides that, a big thing though about Lauren Chen in her early days when she was rolling millennial, she never seemed like a radical at all. She always seemed like a very basic conservative. Always seemed. And not really centrist. I mean, she definitely was center right, but very much just a very typical, normal conservative. And then around 2021, where she allegedly started getting this Russian funding, there's a shift in her content to very extreme positions. For example, someone dug up old tweets of her in her rolling millennial days where she was defending Israel, saying, "Oh, Israel's not an ethno state." And then a couple years later, she's changed her position entirely, saying it was an ethno state. What changed there? Seems like she was paid to change her position.
So is that what
I should say, before you continue, Darkon, I know what really drew attention to this. She retweeted Nick Fuentes shortly after the October 7th attack. Nick Fuentes put out a video basically saying Israel is about to commit a genocide against the Palestinians. And the Western world needs to stand up and tell Israel to screw off and leave the Palestinians alone. And Lauren Chen retweeted a video of Nick Fuentes saying that, and said Nick Fuentes, it was something along the lines of Nick Fuentes with a more based position than any conservative in America.
So as far as what I missed with the live stream right here, and relating to what you guys just said, is that kind of what I've been, what I missed is the preamble talking about how that this money might have affected her beliefs or anyone else's beliefs that worked at Tenet Media or something?
To sum it up, the Department of Justice has put forth an indictment in which it is alleged that Lauren Chen and her husband accepted at least $10 million from the Russian government in order to put forth stories that were consistent with the Russian media, with the Russian government's goals, particularly those related to Ukraine and American public opinion. Specifically, I think they were paid to put forward opinions that positively swayed the American public towards positions that were consistent with Russia's goals.
Yeah, people who are saying, "Oh, the war in Ukraine is not our business," or that, the conflict between Israel and Hamas may seem unrelated, but it's not, because a lot of the same forces, like Iran, for example, who are heavily funding Russia and even donating oil and weapons to them, also share a mutual disdain of Israel. So
both Iran and Syria are very closely aligned with Russia, and obviously both Iran and Syria have a vested interest in destroying it. So from that perspective, Russia would also have a vested interest in supporting Syria and Iran, which would include weakening / destroying Israel.
Yeah, so basically the massive shift in Lauren Chen's position on Israel, from being relatively okay with Israel to suddenly hating them and becoming basically a Nick Fuentes kind of radical on the matter, seems to have originated. I always thought her the change in her position was kind of jarring for me, because I used to think, she's just normal conservative. And then I'm seeing her take these incredibly radical positions in recent years. And I was wondering, was she like paid, or is she pandering to a certain market? What caused this change? And well, now we know. Now, thanks to this indictment, we know she was paid millions by the Russian government to do so.
Was she paid directly, or was just the organization, or by the Russian government itself? I mean,
yeah, she was definitely paid by the Russian government itself. Other people who also received money from
all the videos,
as far as the indictment states, that they were tricked by Lauren Chen and Tenet Media, and didn't know officially that they were being funded by the Russians. But the thing about that is, though,
that's kind of what I've been hearing from videos and live streams, is that they weren't taking money directly from the Russian government. That it was the Russian government that was in business dealings with a couple of Russian billionaires, millionaires, whatever, and then they in turn were funding Tenet.
Well, a lot of those those Hungarian or French billionaires, a lot of them never existed. A lot of them,
and from what I've heard, specifically on Megyn Kelly's show, she spoke to at least two of the people, I forget their names at the moment, but that were approached by Lauren Chen becoming members of Tenet Media. They said they pushed her very hard. They certainly knew who Lauren Chen was, but they also knew there was no way Lauren Chen had the kind of money she was offering them. They wanted to know who was investing. They said, they claimed, and again, this hasn't been tried in court yet. I can't verify whether or not what they're saying is true, but what they are asserting is that when they were in discussions with Lauren Chen, she was extremely evasive about who was providing the money. When they pressed her, she ultimately gave them several names for individuals that had zero online footprint. You Googled their names and you couldn't find anything about these individuals. And those individuals, which are named in the indictment, according to the Department of Justice, they never existed. They were false identities created to hide the fact that the money was coming directly from the Kremlin.
Yeah. Which and the thing about that is though is if you're getting all this massive amounts of money from so-called foreign businessmen who have no online presence and you've never heard of, I don't really believe that like people like Tim Pool were completely unaware. There's no definitive evidence that he knew, but when he's getting all this money from overseas, that possibility had to have existed in his mind. He's not a complete moron. And I just think he just didn't care. He either did know and looked the other way, or he just didn't give a shit.
Is there any definitive proof that any of them knew that the money was like ultimately coming from the Kremlin?
No, there's no definitive proof that any of the other people like Dave Rubin or Tim Pool or Benny Johnson. No, the indictment does not allege that any of them knew that it was coming from the Kremlin. It only
what I will say with Lauren Chen, what I will say is as the way the indictment reads, if the information in the indictment is correct, there is no way Lauren Chen had no idea. Now, the people who are defending Lauren Chen are mostly those that are trying to claim Lauren Chen spoke out against Israel and Israel controls the United States. Therefore, Israel has demanded that Lauren Chen be silenced, and the Department of Justice has fabricated this entire story so as to silence Lauren Chen.
Basically, the only people defending Lauren Chen on this are kind of the Nick Fuentes types who are like the Jews are responsible for everything. Those types of quote-unquote conservatives, they're the only ones pretty much defending Lauren Chen on this. After the indictment dropped, I haven't seen really any like mainstream conservative people defending Lauren Chen.
Yeah.
The reason I'm skeptical of this, and Darkon, I already explained this before he came on, but Lauren Chen is a big enough online presence, but I find it very, very, even if the Nick Fuentes crowd was 100% right, I find it very difficult to believe that Lauren Chen had a large enough online presence that the U.S. government would see her as such a profound threat to their control and their control over the American populace that she had to be taken down at all costs. It just does not. Lauren Chen is not that big of a figure that, assuming what Nick Fuentes said was true, she would not have represented a large enough threat for them to need to take her down like this. So, while that could in principle be true, I find it extremely unlikely.
Nick Fuentes would have? Would Nick Fuentes, in their mind, count as a big enough threat to take down?
Well, no, obviously not, because he's on Twitter. He's doing his show regularly on Rumble. Unlike others that were involved in January 6th, he's free as a bird. So clearly the U.S. government, if the U.S. government believed Nick Fuentes was a huge, supremely profound threat, he'd already be in jail, and he is not. So whatever.
He wasn't put in jail on for his January 6th activity because he never actually entered the Capitol. He was just kind of outside of it. And he has actually been put on the no-fly list, though, is a big thing about Nick Fuentes. He actually cannot fly a commercial flight.
Wow. Probably a good bit of evidence on why that the no-fly list is garbage, even though Nick Fuentes himself is a bit of a garbage person as well. The couple of main sources that I've been hearing about this was from Ranting Monkey and Actual Justice Warrior, and them two, they weren't full deep-throated defending Lauren Chen or anyone else, but AJW was putting forth saying that he is slightly biased because he personally got to know Lauren Chen and all that stuff. And Ranting Monkey, of course, you guys might know, he was at least within arm's length friendly with Lauren Chen. He did that debate side by side with her against Vegan Gains, and I don't know if it was Ask Yourself who was his partner, but whatever. But even they came out not saying that Lauren Chen is responsible for anything malicious, intentionally trying to do some espionage for the Russian government or whatever, but just saying in general, Lauren Chen could be in big trouble. And the way that Monkey especially was talking about was
the charges that could be brought against her from this indictment. She could serve up to 15 years in prison.
And
very, very serious. So she's 30 years old now. She could be up to 45 when she gets out of prison. The most tragic thing about that, though, is she does have a child, and that child might be growing up without her parents.
Right.
Due to their criminal actions.
Another point that was brought up by AJW in his video that I listened to was that this despite whether or not of who's like actually guilty maliciously or not, the fact that this story exists now just gives like ammunition to all the leftists, all the TYTs and everyone else of the world who go saying that the only reason why conservatives have the beliefs that they do or profess the beliefs that they do is purely because of money, not because that they actually believe the said beliefs. You know, those typical talking points like the grifter claim and all that other jazz. And
Well,
so,
to be honest, though, I mean, they're not entirely wrong on the matter, because even if it's true that Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson, and whatever didn't know they were being funded by the Russians, you do have to wonder, what about their content makes Russia want to pay them? What about their content makes the Kremlin want their voices disseminated?
well, I'm not so sure what specific issues that he was like trying to implicate in those claims that leftists make at people like us, but he was just saying more broadly. I mean, it could be. I mean, I don't know. It could be more specifically that the only reasons why that they funded them was because potentially they could be like wooed into saying anti-Israel stuff. Not necessarily that Russia wants them to speak anti-minimum wage stuff, for example.
Dude, well, Russia doesn't give a fuck about the minimum wage or any of that bullshit. The Kremlin only cares about the American people's perception of policy when it comes to advancing the Kremlin's interests. They know if the American people, for example, think that giving funding to Ukraine isn't worth it, and eventually, let's say Trump gets back in office and pulls all support from Ukraine, that's a huge victory for the Kremlin. It means that Ukraine will be much easier to defeat and much easier to force into a settlement that will be far more favorable to the Kremlin. That Ukraine will have to give up much more territory, or would have you, or de-weaponize themselves and simply become a Russian vassal state, or what have you, which is the Kremlin's goal. And these voices on the right who constantly preach this kind of isolationism, people like Tim Pool, absolutely advanced voices in the Kremlin's interest. You can look up a lot of his commentary on the war in Ukraine. He constantly talks about how Ukraine is the enemy of the United States, how we shouldn't be giving them anything, that they're dragging America into a greater war with Russia that could result in a bunch of nukes flying.
Well, I'm sure that they definitely don't care about stuff like minimum wage related issues. It's just that I was trying to bring that up as like an example of I mean, not to say that you were like defending leftist claims on that, just to say that those would be like some issues that I doubt that Russia would be funding these multiple different voices on. But say conservatives who just broadly and in general go, I don't even know if it's like a conservative position necessarily to be, Ukraine bad, Russia good, Israel bad, Hamas meh.
No, it's definitely not a conservative position at all. But there is an element. That's a big thing I want to discuss in the stream. Why does Kremlin propaganda kind of appeal to a big segment of the fringe right? Why I like that, and it's a kind of another interesting phenomena is propaganda from the Chinese communists tends to target the left, whereas propaganda for the Russians tends to target the right. And both malicious and evil authoritarian foreign powers are essentially manipulating both sides of the political spectrum against each other.
You know, it's kind of weird because them two are also in tandem, also kind of a buddy with each other, Russia and China.
They are in buddy with each other, and ultimately the main goal of each side is to sow division in the United States. For example, when the Chinese Communist Party came out talking about how racist America was during the Floyd riots, nobody with half a brain believes that the Chinese Communist Party legitimately care about racism. They're a regime that has ethnic minorities in their country in concentration camps that they frequently use as slave labor. Obviously, they're an incredibly racist regime. So they don't give a shit about racism in the United States, but they'll pretend to if they think it helps sow division in the United States. They like when Americans are fighting each other, and the Russians are kind of the same way. They have the kind of the same goals in the end, but they go about them often in very different ways.
And, here's something I'd like to point out when it comes to foreign policy. Nick Fuentes and his crowd call themselves America First. And they say that because we should, as American citizens, we should care about America's interests, not Israel's interests. And at first glance, that sounds like a very appealing message to an American citizen. But if you stop and think about it, and I think this strikes me as blatantly obvious, every country in the world is trying to influence America's foreign policy towards its own goals, just as America is, as we speak, trying to influence the foreign policy of every other country towards its goals. Like, no shit, Sherlock. Other countries are trying to influence countries other than themselves in order to further their own interests. The question is, does the interests of the average American citizen align with the interests of the average Israeli citizen, or do they conflict with one another? And does the interests of the average American citizen align with the interests of the average Russian citizen, or do they conflict with one another? That's really the real question that the citizens of these countries should be asking. And it's not necessarily a zero-sum game where if the United States aligns with Israel, it necessarily hurts America and vice versa.
It sounds like all these actors within Russian government, Chinese government, and so forth are trying to gaslight us and really the world into saying, oh, our values do align with each other against whatever ambiguous cabal of elitists that might be the foil for said cause,
Exactly. And I think what's ironic in all this, Lauren Chen for the past 2 years has been tweeting and putting out quite a bit of content against Israel and against AIPAC, where she's more or less asserting that Israel has unjust influence in the United States. AIPAC has too much power, too much money, and it's wrong for a foreign government like Israel to have influence on the American public. But as it turns out, again, should these claims prove to be true, Lauren Chen is accepting money from the Russian government, and she, ironically, a Canadian citizen, is accepting money from the Russian government to influence public opinion in America. So she is, in fact, a foreign agent. Again, assuming this is true, it would turn out she is a foreign agent acting on behalf of a foreign government, Russia, and herself being a Canadian citizen, trying to influence American policy. So by her own standard, she's doing the very thing she's accusing Israel of. So clearly she doesn't believe it's wrong.
She pretty much has had many tweets out there over the years saying that AIPAC and Americans who are for Israel, and she accused this to Ben Shapiro himself, which is really disgusting because Ben Shapiro, earlier or a few years earlier, actually tried to hire Lauren Chen, and he's probably saying, "Man, I dodged a bullet not hiring her." He's saying that because he's Jewish, that he has a dual loyalty, that he's loyal to a foreign government before his own country, and thus you shouldn't trust anything Ben Shapiro says because he's not really loyal to America. He has dual loyalties, which is a frequent anti-Semitic trope. And while she's saying this, she's accepting money from an adversarial foreign power and pushing it into the United States to advocate on the behalf of the Kremlin's interests. The hypocrisy there and the evil at play is actually quite staggering.
There was a point of where that Lauren Chen was actually working for Mark Levin and Glenn Beck at Blaze TV. I wonder if
she's been fired.
I was fired or quit?
She was fired 2 days ago, immediately after the DOJ indictment dropped. The Blaze immediately fired her, and YouTube has deleted all her channels.
For some reason, I thought it might have been a lot earlier than this when that she left. Then again, I haven't paid that much attention to Blaze TV when I was subscribed to them. I recently just unsubscribed from them because honestly, nobody there is of significant. I hold much significant prestige to,
right.
But one thing that I wanted to talk about on the issue of money manipulating people's beliefs, the TYT talking point, and it tying in with that being the only reason why people on the fringe right saying pro-Russia and borderline pro-Hamas stuff makes you kind of wonder of how does this influence people when it comes to the issue of Steven Crowder's abuse, for example? Because there were like at least two different conflicting sides, like a few weeks of, well, months now ago, when both Just Pearly Things and Lauren Chen were arguing with each other about Steven Crowder's abuse. And it was hosted on Tim Pool as well. Like, is the Russian money influencing Lauren Chen to have a anti Steven Crowder position?
No, definitely not. But I would say it definitely has when it came to the primary between Trump and DeSantis. One of the weirdest things about Tim Pool and a few other commentators is all of them were really incredibly pro DeSantis in 2021 and 2022, all talking about how he's the future of the party, constantly talking about his accomplishments. And then as soon as he runs against Trump's, there's this weird switch in 2023 where they immediately all start to hate DeSantis. And it was the weirdest from Tim Pool, because Tim Pool basically originally was a DeSantis supporter, supposedly. And then he says he no longer likes him because of an AI generated image in one DeSantis ad, which is only there for a second. And I agree that the DeSantis campaign shouldn't have used that. It was there as a satirical matter. It wasn't really meant. They weren't really saying it was a literal photo. It was basically satire. It was an AI image of Trump hugging Fauci. It was meant to symbolize that Trump allowed Fauci free reign over the government. It was never meant as a real photo. Granted, it probably wasn't all that clearly made, the satirical point in the ad,
taste.
but the way Tim Pool had a freak out about it and decide all of a sudden he didn't like DeSantis anymore was obvious to everyone, completely dishonest. That was not the reason why he decided to drop his support for DeSantis. And again, it's because we now know he's been paid millions by the Russian government. Obviously, Russia would have preferred Trump as the Republican nominee over DeSantis.
Are you trying to say that the Russiagate thing is true or something? Is that what we're building up to in this live stream?
Russiagate thing as in the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians? No. Russiagate as in the Russians do have preferential treatment towards hm? Yeah, that was never disputed. The Mueller investigation and all of those really only disproved the notion or at least found no evidence of that Trump colluded with the Russians to steal the 2016 election. That didn't happen. Trump did not collude with the Russians to change votes or steal the 2016 election. But the Russians absolutely did run interference oppositions that were to Trump's benefit.
And what I can say is, again, every government in the world, here, let me finish this point. I made a video about this on my channel a couple of years ago when the Mueller investigation finished, but it goes without saying, every government in the world uses whatever resources it has available to try and influence other countries' elections to their benefit. I mean, heck, the director of the CIA, the ex-director of the CIA was on Fox News back in 2017 or something. And when the whole Mueller investigation was happening, and I forget, I think it was Laura Ingraham or one of those hosts asked him, does the CIA meddle in other countries' elections? And he kind of looked at the camera with a twinkle in his eye, and he said, if we did, it would only be to the benefit of the American people. And she says, so the CIA has done that in the past, or it actively does that now? And he kind of went, no. He made some stupid noise with his lips. It was no. Basically admitting, this is a former director of the CIA openly admitting that the American government actively tries to influence foreign countries' elections. Well, of course they do, because the American government is out of America, and they're going to try and influence foreign countries to America's benefit. The government of Israel, the government of Russia, the government of China are all out ultimately for the good of their own governments, and they will use all assets in their arsenal to try and influence other countries to those ends. The real question is not which countries are and are not trying to influence our elections. The answer is they all are. The real question is which other countries' interests actually do align with America's interests and which don't. That's the question that we should be answering.
Right. Not, for example, of that, Obama in 2015 actually had instructed a lot of former campaign advisors to try to interfere in Israel's election because Obama didn't like Benjamin Netanyahu, and he actually tried to influence Israel's election towards a prime minister that would be more in for Obama's interests in brokering a peace deal with Iran. So
and again, it almost seems like almost nobody likes Benjamin Netanyahu.
Right. But that's the point, though. The Democrats are kind of hypocrites on that regard with the Russian talking about the Russians as such a big issue. And again, as my 2 cents guy pointed out, all countries do that, including the United States, do often try to run influence campaigns towards other elections, including a lot of Democrat stars.
So the thing that I was going to mention a little bit
be
earlier.
Right back in there. Keep going.
Oh, I
keep
was
going.
okay. I was kind of hoping to say this point to him, but maybe I'll just get your opinion first, 2 cents. The idea of like Russia being pro-Trump for the sake of their own interests, like how would that tie into the Ukrainian war, though? I mean, wouldn't that, if Trump was still president, wouldn't Russia still hold back on invading Ukraine? Wouldn't that be like a piece of evidence that maybe Trump and Russia are not squarely aligned with each other values-wise?
Well, I would say I don't think Russia and Trump are necessarily aligned values-wise in all things. Right now, Russia would support whatever politician is going to either end funding to Ukraine or seek a settlement that ends the conflict in their favor and allows them to save face. I would say the Biden-Harris administration up to this point seems to support a policy which is give the Ukrainians enough money to keep fighting, but not to win. What Trump actually will do is anyone's guess. I know he has claimed that if he was in office, they never would have invaded. At least right now, he supports bringing the war to a conclusion. Now, whether that means giving the Ukrainians so much aid that they actually defeat the Russians, that doesn't seem likely. On the other hand, is it reach a settlement where the Russians are allowed to keep some of the territories they've taken, thus saving face while not conquering all of Ukraine outright? That might be something Trump would be willing to do that would be more favorable. Obviously, it's not favorable to the Russians to fight a 20-year war in which the U.S. keeps giving the Ukrainians enough to keep fighting, but not enough to win. On the other hand, it is favorable to companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and these other defense contractors for that conflict to continue but not end, because it means increased arms sales from the United States. And of course, we know many of these American politicians sit on the boards of those companies and thereby receive the profits.
Well, which is true, but the Russians having this war drawn out severely weakens them in the long run. They're losing mass amounts of military equipment. They're losing tens of thousands of young men, which, given Russia's demographic crisis, is definitely not good for it. And so ultimately, it is in America's national interest for the war to continue, a kind of a stalemate for a long time.
On the point of Russia and Trump being like cozy with each other, I guess there is the idea that wasn't there? Okay, so before the whole Biden phone calls with the Ukrainian businessmen and the like ever came to light, it was Trump that was getting hounded for being having business dealings with Zelensky, I believe it was, right?
No, I think, are you referring to the Biden administration's claims of a Trump interfering in Ukraine, or?
Yeah, something like that.
I think
I'm a little bit fuzzy on
the original claim about Trump in Ukraine goes back to Trump asked the Ukrainians to investigate. While Biden was vice president, he demanded that the Ukrainians shut down an investigation into Burisma, which his son Hunter was on the board of at the time. Basically, the Obama administration threatened to withhold American funding from Ukraine if they didn't fire Viktor Shokin, who was the prosecutor who was looking into Burisma, whom Biden's son was on the board of at the time. Trump then was on a phone call with Ukraine while he was the president, claiming he wanted them to investigate that matter. And he at least insinuated that he might withhold funding from Ukraine if they did not. Of course, there was then the Army lieutenant colonel who came forward claiming that was an inappropriate use of Trump's power. But basically, the irony is that both of them did the exact same thing. Both the Obama administration and the Trump administration did exactly the same thing. And that was they threatened to withhold money from Ukraine unless Ukraine took political action that was useful towards their own political ends. So basically, it's not a question of, again, this isn't a question of who does it. They all do. It's a question of, who's actually honest about it, / which country's interests actually do align with the United States, vice the personal ambitions of a given politician.
Should cut the funding regardless, but wouldn't there be like a little bit of an argument to be made that before Trump lost his reelection back in 2020 that he was like more cozied up with Zelensky though, or were they like pretty much at each other's throats?
Well, it's kind of a myth that Trump was really all that cozy with the Russians, because at the time he actually instituted.
No, I was asking about Zelensky, not Putin.
To my knowledge, the only insinuation that Trump was cozy with Zelensky was in virtue of the deal. He was allegedly trying to pressure the Ukrainians into doing opposition research against Biden. That's the only claim I'm aware of that he was cozy with Zelensky.
So the thing that I was thinking in tandem with Trump being cozy with Russians, but also maybe possibly being cozy with Zelensky at the same time, was that maybe he could manipulate. This is some other word that I was looking for right there. Maybe somehow manipulate Zelensky to peacefully give up the Donbass region to Russia and Putin in some kind of underhanded deal or whatever. Maybe there's like a argument to be made that Putin was like banking on that if Trump was to get like another 4 years or something like that. I mean, what do you think of that?
I mean, it's possible, I guess, but
I'm definitely not asserting it as fact, by the way. But yeah,
well, it's possible less that the Russians were funding content like this, less because they specifically want Trump per se, though it does seem that they would prefer him but and think that like making a deal with him would be easier. But it could just be that they, like I said, they want to like fund like division. They want to like encourage Americans to have distrust in their main governing institutions. And a lot of that isn't just from the Russians. A lot of them have done a lot of things themselves to like limit the public's trust in them.
And I will say this too. Two things can be true at once. I mean, it's obvious the Russian government has a vested interest. If the American people believe the war in Ukraine is unjust and the United States should not be funding Ukraine, that obviously benefits the Russian government. Now, it could be a fact in principle. It could absolutely be true, and I'm not saying it is, but it could be true that the United States has absolutely no interest in Ukraine and the United States should not be funding Ukraine. It could both be the case that benefits, just because it benefits the Russians, that doesn't necessarily make the information false. It just so happens that information, if believed by the American people, benefits the Russians. It also benefits the Russians. If the United States chooses to align with the Palestinians, Syrians, Iranians, as opposed to Israel, that benefits Russia's interests. Now, again, in principle, and I'm not saying it is, it could be the case that America would be better off aligning with the Palestinians, Syrians, Iran, as opposed to Israel. It just, the fact that believing that benefits Russia doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it false. It just so happens that if the American people believe that, it does benefit Russia. So this is where it comes in. The question becomes, did these content creators really believe what they were saying, or did they only say what they were saying because the Russians were paying them? Well, that is a little more complicated to flush out, because again, it could be the case that they read
their mind. So it's
exactly
it's possible to really know for sure.
Exactly. What it really comes down to is the Russian government was paying money, proxy organization, to American commentators to spread narratives that, if believed by the American public, benefit the Russians. Now, at the end of the day, does Russia really care whether it's true or false? No, it only cares about whether or not if believing something true benefits the Russians want Americans to believe it. If believing something false benefits the Russians, they still want them to believe it. And the same is true for the Americans, the Israelis, or any other countries. They have a vested interest in other countries' citizens believing what benefits them, not what's true or false.
Right. Very well said.
So there's like one question in the live chat. Don't know of actually two now. I don't know if you want to address them and if they directly relate to the subject that we're talking about now, Loudmouth.
I don't know. A few, let's see, about the Palestinian pilot who self-immolated. I would say don't do that shit. Is probably the best response to that. I mean, a lot of the memes on that were I like
that was that
Ralph
Air
Wiggum
Force individual, right? He burned himself in front of the Israeli embassy.
Yeah,
I think so.
Okay, yeah, basically, all I can say to that guy was a moron. If he thinks he actually, by doing that to himself, he actually caused any kind of real political change, you're an idiot. All you did was kill yourself. And for that, you're...
in the most painful way imaginable, too.
Exactly.
There's another question further up. Don't know if you want to like tie this in with the current issue. Asking, so how do you feel if Kamala, hairy ass, gets in the White House?
Ultimately, I really dislike her and Trump, so I'm honestly don't care much who wins the next election.
What I will say is this: I'm already black. Anybody who follows my content pretty much black pilled on government. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I don't believe. Period. I don't believe voting really ultimately changes the outcome for a country. What I can say is that evaluating Donald Trump and Kamala Harris as individuals, it is clear to me Kamala Harris is a political hack. She got her start in politics by sleeping with the right man, and all throughout her career, she changes her position to what is most convenient for her at the time. She wanted to ban fracking, but now she's against banning fracking. You know, she wanted open immigration,
supposedly,
but now she's on the border. Basically, whatever her political position is whatever is most convenient to her at a time. She has no real convictions. She simply wants power.
I mean, that's
Donald
also
Trump,
true for Trump as well, though.
Yeah, fair enough. I will say Donald Trump, if you evaluate, his positions, I think to a degree this is true of all politicians. I would say it is especially true for Harris as opposed to Trump. But
yeah, like back in 2020, she was for banning fracking, and then she has that one interview that Monkey covered a little bit ago of where she was all like, I am not for banning fracking. And then the interviewer asked, did you change your position? And she was like, I never changed my position. So are you still for banning fracking? Because your past position was for banning fracking. I not for banning fracking. I was never. She was like doing a whole.
Basically, all it was her saying, "I don't want to answer this question," and trying to like dodge it itself. But honestly, some of Trump's flip flops have been worse. Probably the biggest and most despicable of his flip flops are his position on TikTok. The sole reason I voted for Trump in 2020 was the fact that he made moves to ban TikTok, and I didn't think Biden would. Well, I was extremely wrong on that, because Biden actually, to his credit, banned TikTok with an overwhelming bipartisan majority. And Trump, because he's a fucking idiot, or he's being paid off by investors who give money to TikTok, or have investments in TikTok, has somehow changed his mind and says, vote for me to save TikTok, which is probably one of the most moronic positions you can have, as TikTok has done enormous damage to our society. It allows the Chinese Communist Party to spy on hundreds of millions of people, millions of American teens, and allows them, through manipulation of the algorithms, to install anti-American ideas into children.
Not only that, but a lot of his base is also against TikTok. So you're kind of going against your own constituents by doing that, Trump.
It's
well, sorry to interrupt quick. I have to bow out at the moment. Loudmouth, thanks for having me on.
Oh,
see you around 2 cents. You're saying though?
Oh yeah. Well, I was going to talk.
I just wanted to add on to your point there, as far as how it's a bad move on Trump's part.
Oh, it's a terrible move on Trump's part, and it really shows. I once, when Trump first ran, I debated so many room temperature IQ and right-wing NPC dipshits who would tell me that we need Trump over other politicians because he can't be bought. Because he's so rich and stuff, he can't be bought.
Back in 2016,
that's bullshit. He can be bought very easily.
You're referring to back in 2016 and 15?
Yeah, mostly. I heard that all the time from the dumbest in our society. And his flip flop on TikTok is really the ultimate proof of just how untrue that is. As soon as he got various support from people who have millions invested in TikTok, he immediately flipped his position to a position that's extremely bad for this country.
Sounds like another moment where that you have to tell other people, "Hey, can you just bend over and kiss my ass now?"
Right. Yeah, I would love to track down every single one of them and tell them that, but I'm too lazy. But but TikTok is incredibly dangerous. You want to talk about the influence of the Russians via Tenet? Yeah, it's bad, and what Lauren Chen did was beyond evil and disgraceful. And if she's guilty, I really do hope they throw the book at her and she spends years behind bars. But the damage that Tenet and Russian media operations have done is 1/1000th the damage TikTok does to this country every day.
So ultimately in this whole thing, you do think that Lauren is like a malicious actor in all this?
There seems to be very little doubt. Unless the DOJ has like engaged in one of the biggest frame operations against a private citizen in history, the evidence against her seems incredibly concrete. Like, for example, this is a good example of how fucking stupid she was when she was talking to one of those so-called friend, trying to trick someone into talking with one of those Russian Kremlin operatives who she lied and claimed were like Hungarian businessmen or what have you. She was stupid enough to Google the time in Moscow while doing it. So just Googled it, not within a browser that hides your information or through a VPN service. She just flat out Googled it. When you're doing a criminal enterprise, that is a terrible way of covering your tracks. Really,
I guess there is possibility, like a possibility that there is some other more damning quote that came out in the indictment within the last day or two that haven't been updated on. It was just I think it was mostly just in the earlier days of where that monkey and AJW got informed on, and they were basing Lauren's motives off of that more than anything. That she was just trying to innocently strike a business deal, not necessarily trying to be pro-Russia in the in turn of that, but maybe there's some more evidence to say that she is ultimately intentionally trying to sell out the United States for the sake of a buck from the Kremlin.
It seems like there's very little doubt that that's exactly what she did. That she that for all her America First posturing, America First often is just code for we hate the Jews for a lot of these morons in the like the Groypers, the Nick Fuentes types, because ultimately their definition of America First is just anti-Israel.
Ultimately, I would hope that the term America First gets appropriated in a new light, but that seems to be a lot of what it means in a lot of contexts, unfortunately, because ultimately you could say that I'm America First. I prioritize America over Israel as far as my ethics and what laws I think the United States should pass or whatever. But ultimately, that doesn't make me explicitly anti-Israel. Like, ultimately, Israel still has at least my verbal support anyways. Well, although the longer that the war goes on, the more critical my mind kind of gets of Bibi Netanyahu, but I digress.
Well, even with me, I agree. As you know, I'm a supporter of Ukrainian principle, but I do absolutely have fear of Russia's nuclear weapons. And another part of me is like, yeah, I want the Ukrainians to have their sovereignty, freedom, and independence. But if it's between them losing their country and every American city becoming a pile of ash, I'm kind of like, between those two options, I got to say, fuck them. Okay. Because I do not want that to happen. So I do think we should take Russian nuclear threats seriously. We should take that possibility seriously to an extent. That doesn't mean you just let the Kremlin get whatever they want, or you provide Ukraine no support whatsoever, because that also is incredibly dangerous for America long term, as it encourages Russia to engage in more aggressive behavior, because if they know that they can easily get what they want through nuclear threats, they're likely going to continue using that to gain more and more and more, and further push the world towards war. So kind of having this conflict right now contained in Ukraine is presently good for America's interests. It is in America's interest very strongly for the Russian military to be weakened fighting Ukraine, losing thousands of men, losing enormous military resources here, so that they're not threatening NATO allies or possibly even our homeland.
Yeah, honestly, there was something that I heard. If true, it would probably make me like plainly neutral on the Ukraine versus Russia war. And the claim, like, I am going to presume that you don't believe this because you haven't seen any evidence at all. And I don't believe it so far because it is, I cannot find any evidence, but at the same time, freaking DuckDuckGo is not exactly being very straightforward with their algorithm, so I can find any kind of article that even covers the issue, let alone provides evidence for the claim. But the claim is Zelensky killing Russian ethnic Russians that lived in the Donbass region when it was still under Ukrainian control. And if that was really true,
but
if
most
Zelensky
of these
really,
like Russian civilians in there were like rebels fighting fighting against the Ukrainian government, okay, and they were Russian-backed separatists, though.
So you have like heard of the story?
Yeah, the chaos in the Donbass region that's been occurring for the past 10 years. Yeah. Following the Russians' annexation of Crimea, the Kremlin has been funding vast militias in the Donbass to fight against the Ukrainian government. And a lot of the claims are also clearly false.
Could you link me a couple of your readings about that story? Because I find like really hard to find any articles about that specifically. It's just a bunch of like overly simplistic pro Zelensky stuff that I end up finding that does not relate to that story like at all.
I mean, you can look at the Donbass has been a war zone in long before the 2022 invasion, because there's been a lot of like separatist groups in eastern Ukraine.
Maybe you can help. I mean, if you do not have the links to the articles that you read or can't
Not at the
remember
top
them,
of my head, but I could possibly find something later. Netflix had a really good documentary called Turning Point on it that goes through kind of the history of Russia after the fall of the Cold War and all the various circumstances that led to Russia becoming what it is that would lead to the war in Ukraine. A lot of
and I
it
take it that it was not a kiss assery to Zelensky.
No, I don't think so. But what it was after the Cold War ended, and after like all these different Soviet countries became sovereign states, there was a bit of a problem as a country that was under communist rule for decades now all of a sudden had to privatize itself and become a private economy, which seems in principle is a good thing. Obviously I'm a proud capitalist, and I believe capitalist industries work much better than communism. So what happened was that that's previously state-owned enterprises were kind of split into various different shares, and those shares were distributed to the Russian people, kind of like, since of course as Russian taxpayers they paid for them, that each of them would kind of be stakeholders in these new enterprises. In theory, that seems like a good idea, but in practice, it was a fucking disaster, because what happened is so many people were handed these and they didn't really understand their potential worth, and individually they weren't worth much. So a lot of officials who previously were members of the Communist Party, who later became oligarchs, they basically would trade people often less than they were worth for these shares, and they were to accumulate shares, and thus wealth inequality in Russia was dramatic. You had a tiny percentage of former communist officials who essentially formed themselves into a now gangster regime that had basically allowed complete control of Russia's industry. Basically, Russia went from a communist state to oligarchical state based on corruption. Russia, and to this day, essentially, that's still what it is. Putin's essentially like the world's biggest oligarch because his personal wealth may be in the hundreds of billions, and that's what Russia is. It's basically a gangster regime at this point.
A bigger oligarch than anybody in China.
Certainly. Here's a question: what's Putin's political party? Do you know?
No.
Yes, exactly. Most people don't know. It's some new Russia party, whatever. It ultimately doesn't even really matter because Russia is not really a one-party state in terms of like China is. In China, of course, everyone knows the political party that rules China, the Communist Party. They have total control there, and ultimately, it's a one-party state that's controlled by kind of an elitist communist elite. But Russia doesn't really have a single party structure. It's basically just a bunch of rich business interests that basically control the government. Essentially, a bunch of warring gangsters.
Okay. I guess the more official businesses, the ones that are not like run by gangsters and mobs, the more official businesses the ownership would ultimately flow up all the way to Putin. Whereas in China, technically, it's owned by private individuals, but those private individuals are mandated to be part of the CCP, and they're closely aligned and allied up with each other. And if you dare like stray away, then that's when your ownership and gets seized from you, and maybe even you're assassinated or something.
Well, yeah. What China does is kind of brilliant. Ever since the Deng Xiaoping in the late 70s, they have a kind of a system where they allow private enterprises to flow into the country, and that's given vast foreign investment into the country. That's made the country rich, as long as everyone keeps their mouth shut and pay fealty to the Communist Party. Yeah, but if you
it's like a de facto capital, or not de facto, a fake capitalism of some sorts.
Well, even though China is officially a communist country, it's really more of a fascist country at this point than it is communist.
Yeah.
And Russia is kind of also the same way, but it's organized differently. But this resulted in after the Soviet Union collapsed, when people freed from communism should have had their living standard go up, it actually went down. Now, we Americans, we are incredibly nostalgic for the 1990s because I was around back the time when I was a kid. We were good. We had it pretty good. The 90s were pretty awesome for America. It was a great time to be a kid, and we had great economic growth. And it was a time when everyone was like, "The Cold War's over, man. The end of history. We're headed towards a more peaceful world." But in Russia, the 90s sucked. They were under constant political turmoil. They had terrorist attacks from Chechen separatists, and the government was in a constant state of upheaval with the Yeltsin administration clashing with the Russian parliament, and it's slowly moving more and more towards putting more power in the hands of the president.
What a shame there's no more dynasty. I admire ancient Chinese culture, says Steamer the Steam Train.
Yeah, I'd rather it not be a dynasty, but fuck the Chinese Communist Party. I'd rather China become like what the Republic of China has become in Taiwan. That's my goal is real, though who knows if that'll ever happen.
Yeah. I was just feeling like mentioning this useful chart world history graph that I have right here. There's this one big red line right here that is basically the history of China, or at least the major dynasties of China throughout their history, like Han Dynasty, Tang Dynasty, and all that stuff.
You could argue that the Xi Jinping is pretty much a current Chinese emperor. Even though that's obviously not officially his title. His official title is General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, but essentially he's an emperor, and he's acquired more power in China than anyone has since Mao. But even then, he's always dealing with rival factions within his party. Whereas Putin, in some ways, is more dangerous because his absolute power in Russia is possibly greater than Xi Jinping's in China, and
Wow.
and of course he sits on enough nuclear weapons to end civilization and exterminate the human race multiple times over.
Who has more nukes, Russia or China? It's Russia, right?
That
I also saw this one video that said that Russia has the most tanks in the entire world.
but but they were terrible at maintaining them. Want to know what's really funny is apparently a lot of their vehicles when they went on the invasion didn't work because the vehicles have been kept parked for so damn long that the tires apparently had never been rotated and they had like solar damage and they still, and I'm like, you morons are going into war and you didn't even do a tire inspection on your war vehicles? Every truck driver in America does that every day. That's like standard part of the job.
Wow.
So who knows how many of Russia's nukes work, but the thing is they have almost 6,000 of them, and even if 90% of them don't work, the rest of them are still enough to end civilization.
By themselves, or it would spook other people to ignite their nukes and therefore end civilization?
Honestly, both, because even if 600 nukes go off, that's more than enough to trigger a climate shift that would end crop production around the world, which would result in billions starving. Without a long growing season, without fertilizers, agrochemicals, pesticides, and a whole list of threads that hold society together, no one will be able to grow crops. No crops, no one eats, and you know what happens then?
Yeah.
Nuclear war should be taken seriously because the possibility is terrifying. But also, for other reasons, you can't just let roll over and let the Kremlin get away with anything just because they have nukes. And you always have to remember, we may be scared of their nukes, they're scared of ours as well. No one in the Kremlin wants nuclear war, but the risk of, as tensions rise between the two powers, and the both are incredibly are incredibly scared of the other acting, that it could trigger some accidental conflict or a series of just uncontrolled escalations. So that's always something you have to be mindful of.
Mm-hmm. For right now, thankfully, it's nothing but saber rattling. It has been for the last 2 years, at least, anyways.
Yeah, but you should consider since 2022, Russia has issued more nuclear threats than they have since the end of the Cold War. Between 1991 and 2022, they issued far fewer nuclear threats than they have in the last couple of years. So things have escalated to a quite scary degree.
Yeah,
and it's scary. It's hard not to be scared of it.
So, was there anything more that we wanted to say about these political pundits who were, who worked for Tenet, which Tenet got funded by Russia?
As I said, I think it's a good example of why no one should listen to Tim Pool, because as I've shown before, I think he's a malicious and dishonest individual.
I thought he was pretty a substance anyways. I mean, I guess I did not have any heavy opinion either way on him. I vaguely seen clips and whatnot of where that he was definitely being a fence sitter, the epitome of a fence sitter, not just a centrist on the overall issues, but just being a fence sitter on every individual issue. But the thing that really turned me off was when that he was going to bat for Steven Crowder and his abuse case,
Right, that and like I said, that weird shift that he made on DeSantis that based on really petty, trivial reasons. Even if there's no evidence of that in the criminal indictment, I'm personally 100% convinced that he was being incredibly dishonest, and he was paid maybe not by the Russians, but someone to change that position. When somebody makes or
maybe he's just naturally an idiot.
When someone makes an extreme shift in their position for reasons that seem incredibly trivial and don't make any sense, the chances that they were paid to do so are like 9 out of 10. that as a general rule of thumb. I realize people do change their positions over time based on things that change in their lives or differing world circumstances. Everyone does. But if there's like a sudden, a weird shift in a position, a 180 that doesn't really make any sense or fit what happened at all, yeah, I'm willing to bet they were paid to change that position. Someone's asking me how much of Shapiro did I watch. That was something I want to get into, because Shapiro was like was talking about this and talking about how Lauren Chen he used to like, but then she went off the deep end a couple of years ago. And like I said, he really dodged a bullet not hiring her.
Yeah. I will say that Shapiro's beliefs seem to be a little bit more of a gradual change, whatever evolution there was. Like, as much of an issue that I have with him, like, walking back his former get the government out of marriage position when it came to gay marriage, it has been, like, gradual enough over the last 8 years to where that there is a possibility that it was not some kind of funding by some kind of super trad con, stone the gays kind of group of people that were funding him or whatever. That it could be just him just naturally coming to his own conclusions, be it with maybe a little bit of ideological and indoctrinal pushings by other people within his close circles or whatever.
Well, I'll give you an example of that. Shapiro, for example, didn't vote for Trump in 2016, and now he's pushing for him. But he has done, even though I don't agree with him on that, obviously, he's justified that change of position in a way that does seem honest. He says, Trump is still kind of an asshole, and he definitely, and you can tell that he's very frustrated with Trump's behavior at times. But he's like, he did some stuff as president that I really liked, and thus I still want him over the Democrats. And honestly, that seems like a position. While I don't agree with it, I think it's an honest position that comes from like changing circumstances. It's not like with Tim Pool. Oh, there was an AI image in this, therefore that changes my whole position on this guy. I'm an honest person.
He definitely did prefer Ron DeSantis, though. He was like out. There was a little short that he posted talking about, well, looks like Trump is our nominee now, referring to 2024. And he iterated in that short that he did prefer Ron DeSantis, that he was supporting him in the primaries and so forth. But yeah, so a little thing that like helps to prove to people that you are not being paid off by somebody is if you're absolutely upfront with your beliefs. And I think that with the case of Ron DeSantis, for example, when he was like originally coming out in support of Trump, when he put his presidential campaign to a close, there are other people that are rather critical of this move and think it's rather petty of him. But the fact that he gone enunciating, there are things I disagree with Trump on, like how he was too friendly with Fauci and how he handled the lockdowns in general. But ultimately, he's still better than Biden, because that was who was running for the Democratic nomination at the time. And so with him saying that gives, at least provides a little bit of evidence to me anyways, that he is being a little bit more sincere with his endorsement of Trump, as opposed to, Tim Pool, like you said there, Loudmouth.
Right. And Lauren Chen, she also like accused DeSantis supporters of being paid to support DeSantis while she was taking money from the Russians. While she knew she was taking money from the Russians. Fuck her, man. She is she's like she's a pretty little snake,
Yeah. Fuck her, as long as it's not you who's fucking her.
Fuck you, man.
Sorry.
I know.
Anybody who's like old enough fan of us will get those references. But yeah.
Yes, I have flirted with her in the past. Every young conservative on the internet has. So what? Okay, come on. I never denied that she is a very beautiful woman. I didn't know she was a Russian spy at the
time. That just sounds like the workings of a B-movie spy comedy movie.
Yeah.
Instead of
That's why I
lifting,
named the stream "From Russia with Money" because it's a obvious parody of "From Russia with Love."
yeah. Instead of it being Eric Swalwell and a Chinese spy, it's Loudmouth and a Russian spy.
Yes, but I have nothing. But I have no intelligent information that would give her reason to do. I mean, that is kind of like a cliche of Russian spies being gorgeous women who would like seduce people and like spilling things, and that well, that's been a tactic of warfare really since the beginning of time. Because like there was this great cartoon made during World War II of Private Snafu. This cartoon was fucking hilarious. It has this soldier Private Snafu who's kind of like Kenny in South Park. He died at the end of every cartoon, and in one he like has a trained military secret, and all these like birds who work for the Japanese and the Nazis wanted to get it out of him. So this attractive woman like gets him drunk and he's just blabbing his mouth for, yeah, I can. We're rolling out 3:30. And all of a sudden her boobs transform into radio receivers and Adolf Hitler's on the other side listening to him like, yes, yes.
Wait, oh yeah, that was one of the, oh dang it. You might have just mentioned the name of the
during
guy.
World War II. It was fucking hilarious. It had
Some
Mel
cartoon.
Blanc,
What was the name of the cartoon again? What's the name of the cartoon again?
Yeah, Private Snafu.
Private Snafu. Yes, that was. Sorry. But yeah, now you reminded me about that. I still gotta like check out some shorts of that on YouTube or something, as if I can find it, anyways.
Yeah, and at the end, basically, Private Snafu and all his men get blown up by the Nazis, and then he's in hell, and he's like, "Who blabbed? Who gave up our secret?" And then someone holds a mirror in his face. You dummy!
Yep.
And his head transforms into a horse's ass, and then the cartoon ends.
The Steam Train says, "Is she trying to kill moose and squirrel?" I guess that's a Rocky and Bull,
Exactly.
right? Rocky and Bullwinkle.
She's like, she's like Natasha from that. Luring all the horny young conservative men to be like Russian agents.
Be a bunch of simps for her, which in turn is defending Russia.
Yeah, like a whole bunch of 14, 15-year-old boys will be, I'll join Russia for you, hon. I swear.
Well, good thing that my personal preference is black women, not Asian women. Oh, wait a minute. That means that Candace Owens could have manipulated me.
Yes. But honestly, as I was saying before you got here, she got famous because of that, like, the malicious copyright claim from Lacey Green, the good old Streisand effect, and of course, and audience found her channel from that, and really they mostly just stuck by her. Let's be honest, just because she's pretty, she really didn't have anything else to her content. Her content was pretty boring most of the time. It was pretty basic, pretty average. But the only thing she had going that other YouTubers didn't have was a very pretty face.
Who would you say is like a smart female commentator worth listening to consistently?
Honestly, that's a really tough one. They've kind of been fucking us up over this one bitch like came to my answers like, hey, you want an apple? He's like, sure, why not?
I wonder if there's like any that I can think of now that I think about it. I'm just curious. I'm sure there's got to be at least one that I have had some respect for. I don't know.
Well, her channel's kaput, so I don't know how and the Blaze firing her. I don't know what she's going to do to do for money now, other than maybe ask the Russians.
Hey, have you ever checked out Jay Longbone?
No.
I know that Jay Longbone is not a political commentator. She's more a movie reviewer, but man, is she witty and funny. I suggest checking her out sometime.
I'll try to remember her.
Another one, Alicia Clegg. She's only like in the couple thousand, so you might not have heard of her yourself. And I think she's kind of weaning off of political commentary. Um, Mainly had some more of the conspiratorial side of things, commentary, but it's not like she was like ever anti-Semitic or anything really stupid like that or anything. Just slightly, ever so slightly on the weird side of things.
Right.
How about Sugar Tits, actually?
I haven't watched her in a long time. What's her content going?
Oh, I haven't been subscribed to her ever. Recently she's been doing these collaborative projects with her husband Bearing. Like it'd be Bearing talking about some new subject that she never heard about, and she's just reacting to it on the spot.
All right.
As they're both
I
like
like that her. I
about
just
it.
like that her screen name mirrors something Mel Gibson when he was drunk. That's what he called a female cop. Called her sugar tits.
Oh wow! Wait, that's a real life story.
You didn't know that? Yeah, but way back in 2006, yeah, Mel Gibson. He calls a female cop. He's arrested while shit faced drunk, and he calls the cop sugar tits.
Wow.
I just find that she named herself after that as her screen name. I just think that's awesome.
How about Shoe on Head?
Yeah. Again, she's never really been that good.
Shoe on Head. Well, yeah, I guess not.
I mean, I don't dislike her, but
she's always been all right in my opinion. I mean, ultimately, she does like talk for men when it comes to men's issues. If you like ever check out her videos in regards to that, although unfortunately she takes some of it from a rather socialist perspective, saying that part of the reason as to why that men are so miserable is because lack of living wage and shit like that.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, she was useful at a time for like debunking the bullshit of the wage gap. So,
Right. I will say that one lady that I was once subscribed to for a while, her name was Gothics, and honestly, thinking back on it, yeah, I was only subscribing to her because she ultimately was a black female. Just she said some of the right stuff, even if it was nothing revolutionary. And really thinking back on it, it's not like she was saying anything really that intuitive or anything. It was just like the same thing that a lot of other people were saying. She was part of one of those leaving the left Blexit. Yeah, one of those hashtag Blexit gals back a few years ago. Back in 2021, actually, was one that she came out saying why I'm leaving the Democratic Party and stuff like that. And she like just increasingly more and more become like more and more tradcon to where that ultimately she's all like ban gay people from adopting, period, point blank.
Oh damn! But I mean, yeah, that's cool. Whatever. But I'm thinking though another thing about this. I don't think Lauren Chen is the only one who's been ensnared in this. I think she's just the first one we're hearing about. I think there's going to be other like big commentators who've also been getting Russian money. Like, I mean,
Benny Johnson was another name dropped about this issue.
Well, I think more are going to leak out soon. I think that there's other people I strongly suspect, but I'm not obviously don't have evidence on it.
Yeah. What about Brett Cooper? Asks Steamer.
Brett Cooper, what about her? Oh, I guess she's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, she's that chick on the Daily Wire. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't checked out anything from her. Honestly, I've been getting like increasingly more strange from the Daily Wire, not because of them being funded by Russians necessarily, but maybe they just have purely their own agenda. But it's mainly like Matt Walsh, who has been the biggest turnoff for me. I never liked Michael Knowles ever at all. Never went on my way for Andrew Clavin and Ben Shapiro. I don't know. I've just been slowly weaning off. Might even like a unsubscribe or whatever.
I'm actually a Daily Wire Plus member. I like his content, but I watched this one like he tried to do this adult cartoon show, like honest
Mr. Burcham.
Brister Burcham, and honestly, it was bad. I'm sorry. I wanted to like it because I like the idea of like a more a right wing a comedy adult cartoon show, but it was not. It just very few of the jokes got a chuckle out of me. The second episode, almost every joke fell flat. The only joke that was even slightly funny was one where this one kind of like ultra woke teacher has. I found a new idea for school uniforms that are very gender neutral, and he's holding a picture of someone in a burqa. Okay, that was a little bit funny, but that was the only joke that got a chuckle out of me. Every other joke was lame.
It's very gender neutral. Just to imagine that everybody walking
that
the streets just in a giant tent.
Yeah. I mean, even that joke wasn't that funny. I just got a bit of a chuckle, and every other joke was total cringe. I'm like, sorry, Ben. I appreciate what you're doing, but you need to hire better writers. South Park has been making fun of the left for way better than you for 25 years, and they're not even like explicitly a conservative show. They're just kind of like center-right libertarians.
You know, since we're on this subject, what's your opinion of King of the Hill?
It's all right.
I've been like getting recommended a whole bunch of clips and reviews of the show. It makes me really think, yeah, I definitely should give it a good old watch. It definitely seems to be definitely more nuanced than what I hear of Mr. Burcham, but it seems to be a kind of a conservative leaning, maybe, or at least very friendly to conservatives, as it portrays all the issues that a modern conservative dad like Hank Hill might have in the modern day. Taking it from
I've always been a fan of Mike Judge. I mean, he did direct Idiocracy, which is probably my favorite comedy.
He also was a producer of King of the Hill or something.
Yeah, King of the Hill. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. He also did some voiceovers for in South Park, so he's like friends with the South Park guys, Trey and Matt.
Gotcha.
But yeah, Mr. Burnsham, it wasn't good. I wanted to like it, but I didn't.
Yeah, I got seeing ads and I got thinking, maybe I am more incentivized to get myself a Daily Wire Plus subscription at this point. And then I go hearing people in the comments in that Facebook post that I shared, saying, I go hearing that's not very good. And I go seeing all the reviews, and it seems like even though that a lot of these people responding to Mr. Burcham are like kind of left-leaning-ish, centrist at best, even from what they show of the clips, it seems pretty fall flat. Like the animation style, now that I take a closer look at the animation style, doesn't look that good.
No, it's pretty cheap looking. It looks like Flash animation. It definitely doesn't look like they had much of an animation budget.
Although I go hearing stuff about the pilot for Mr. Burcham that was better. That they even drew the wife of Mr. Burcham a whole lot more physically appealing.
Well, the pilot, there were 2 episodes. The pilot was definitely the better of the 2. I thought the pilot was barely passable, and the second episode, not even that.
Well, it was an older pilot back in the earlier 2010s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Maybe I'll go back and I think it might have been Just Stop's YouTube channel, or no, it was someone else entirely. Dang it, I might not be able to find it at that point because there's some.
I mean, I appreciate what the Daily Wire trying to create their own entertainment, because we get companies like Disney and Netflix often while there are good shows on those services, obviously they often put out like really shitty crap that it's obnoxious in your feed. So,
but at the same time, it seems that they want to approach the issue of entertainment from almost as much of an unnuanced approach as Disney, saying, "Oh, you must be always preaching for the right, never make crack any." Or barely ever, anyways, crack at any jokes that are against right-leaning figures or anything like that.
Yeah, it's terrible for comedy to ever like only attack one side, because then everyone knows what every joke is going to be before you say it. South Park, the fact that it kind of like goes after everyone, you often don't know what kind of angle they're going to go for, and you end up being surprised that they come up with something out there and clever.
Somebody even made the comment. I don't know if they were saying that this was something that I actually read that is a rule with Daily Wire, or if they just theorize. But the idea that somebody would make a Jew joke that would not be allowed on Daily Wire Plus, because I guess Ben Shapiro and Matt Boring are kind of overly sensitive about that. One thing that I can definitely criticize them too about is that the non-allowance of any Jew jokes at all. I'm not saying that I'm not a person of the JQ question that likes to ponder about that or a whole lot, but I do appreciate a good black Jew in the back of the oven joke every now and again.
I mean, South Park. I mean, Matt Stone, one of the creators, is Jewish, and it does lots of jokes against Jews.
Wow.
Yeah, so they did a good joke on a recent episode that kind of poked fun at Kanye West, and it has Cartman going around saying that Kyle must run Hollywood, and telling that to everyone. And at the very end of the episode, the credits just list Matt Stone under everything as a joke.
Yeah. Although I will say, as unnuanced as Mr. Burcham and Daily Wire is, apparently there are some boomer cons that go watching Daily Wire Plus that are even more unnuanced than that, saying that they have a problem with the inclusion of gay people at all in Mr. Burcham's show, even if it's portraying those gay people in a negative light. That's a no-go. That's a no-go. That's not okay.
Yeah, I need to maybe sample more of their content to see if any of it's better, but in terms of Ben Shapiro's commentary, I generally think he's a good commentator. I enjoy listening. He's a smart dude.
Yeah, maybe I should I don't know, go back to listen to him every now and again or something, just to get multiple different perspectives. I was just really disappointed when he came out saying that he wants trans people to be banned from owning guns.
Wait, did he actually say that?
Yeah, I could not find where the exact original clip of it, but Blair White played a clip of it unedited in this little 30-second to a minute segment of where that he said that he thinks that there's an argument that can be made that people with gender dysphoria can be banned from owning guns. And I go thinking, we're conservatives. We've been against universal background checks for the longest time because is that a hair or something? Anyway, sorry. I was thinking to myself, we are conservatives. We, for the longest time, have been against universal background checks, in large part because they go affecting mentally ill people in a rather.
Definitely not against universal background checks, dude. And if you're a criminal who's a criminal record, you shouldn't be allowed.
No, not criminal background checks. Universal background checks. Because the universal background check, from what I've read up, they would also negatively affect people who are even just mildly mentally ill from owning a gun. I mean, we've been against those, and now suddenly we want to make an exception when it comes to the mental illness of gender dysphoria for some reason. It seems to be just almost mildly hypocritical. I mean, I am for, or at least okay with criminal background checks, but just not the universal kind. Like if you have PTSD from the war or something, I don't think you should be banned from it.
Yeah, as I've said before, the Uvalde tragedy could have been prevented if someone had looked at the guy's social media feed, noticed that he was posting videos of him committing sickening crimes, but no one followed up on it. Nobody prosecuted. So he was able to buy a gun anyway, which was ridiculous.
Well, that gets more in the area of criminality than just plain old mental illness.
He had an image on social media carrying around a dead cat, which is evidence that he was guilty of felony animal abuse, but he was never prosecuted.
Yeah, but animal
abuse is something under the law prevents you from buying a gun if you're ever guilty of.
But something like a person just goes doing a whole bunch of depression posting on their social media, life is horrible, therefore ban them. That's not okay.
Well, I'll agree. I wouldn't agree with that. But if there's evidence that someone's dangerous and committing animal abuse is absolutely evidence of that, you got to prevent them.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But like not like the vast majority of like spree killers and serial killers, they start out with animal cruelty.
Well, he is from Cali, so of course he's sensitive on Jew jokes, says Steamer the Steam Train. Yeah, I guess that's a kind of a thing. Like, a few years ago, Don the Pleb, I heard him making the comment that people's go making statements about how that Alabama, Mississippi, and all these other bastions of republicanism and conservatism in general are so conservative. Really, even states like those don't really have as much to compare to conservatives that live in the hills of California. That those people like make most other conservatives in other states of the country look milk toast by comparison.
Yeah.
Although maybe Ben is like a extreme in like a different way from what Don was saying, but still.
But like, I think Tucker Carlson is probably going to be ensnared as like taking money from the Russians, because he's put out outright straight up Russian propaganda over the last few years. Did you see his horrible video like in a Russian grocery store?
I heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
It's fucking trash. He goes through and like, wow, look at how cheap all this Russian food is. Oh my God, Russia's so much better and cheaper to live in the United States. Relative to income, the food is not cheaper at all. The average Russian is like 5 times poorer than the average American. Like 30 million people in Russia do not have indoor plumbing. Most Russians live in abject poverty.
The Russia trip, part 1 from from Tucker Carlson.
It's essentially Russian propaganda.
Okay.
So him having well, I think he's actually taken some work in Russian state-owned media. Technically, it's not illegal to do that. It's only illegal if you like fail to register and funnel in money, which Lauren Chen allegedly did. Well, basically, you have to register as a foreign agent in order to do that. If Lauren Chen had registered as a foreign agent and everyone who got the money knew that it came from Russia, there'd be no crime. But what Lauren Chen's alleged not only did not register as a foreign agent, but she deceived people into taking the money without telling them where it came from. Those are serious crimes.
So, do you think that any person that she might have goaded into like working with them, that they are more innocent than Lauren?
Oh, certainly they're more innocent than Lauren. But as I said, I don't really fully believe that Tim Pool didn't at least suspect that the money came from Russia and just didn't care.
So you think Tim Pool is more innocent than Lauren Chen?
Oh, 100%. The indictment doesn't allege really any criminal activity from any major commentator except Lauren Chen and her husband. But
Mr. Scott says, just like Hunter Biden registered as a foreign agent, right? Well, I can only imagine that there are like other issues relating to Hunter Biden, other than the fact of whether or not he registered
justifying
as a
bad
foreign agent.
behavior by pointing to other bad behavior is the lamest deflection.
Also, I don't think it was just
that. He's being prosecuted for that, and so should Lauren Chen. Well, and I must say how much I envy her future 250-pound lesbian girlfriend in federal prison.
Oh, oh man,
jokes, yeah, jokes. Yes.
Nothing like jail rape, right?
That was a joke.
In all seriousness, like I'm not going to like wish harm done on her. I mean,
no, I won't wish that on her. Not in all seriousness, but I will. But I will. I do hope she does some time for this, because it is a serious crime.
Mm-hmm.
That right? She committed a crime. She willfully deceived people. She aided an enemy state to the United States. Fuck her. She absolutely deserves time for that.
Should people be arrested for shit what they say on social media, like someone pretend to be a deviant for the lulz?
Did I argue that? I argued that if you're showing evidence of animal cruelty, like you're posing with dead cats, yeah, you should be prevented from. You should be arrested and then have your gun rights taken away for that. Yes.
No, but not necessarily if you're posing with what is obviously like a fake dead cat corpse.
It wasn't fake.
Well, yeah, I believe you. I was just bringing up an example by contrast.
Guy is he was the kind of guy who did that. He was the guy who did later murder 20 children, while the police stood around and watched for an hour.
All right. So, what else? Or are we about to wind down here?
We're mostly winding down, but I just thought that this big issue was something that needed to be chatted about.
Yeah, and
we can make more jokes about the situation, though. I don't know.
Quite understandably so.
I mean, before you jumped in, I have a riddle for you. What is something that you both do not want to have and also do not want to lose?
What?
A criminal indictment.
Oh. Yeah.
You both don't want to have it, but don't want to lose it.
Yeah. Well, it's not a joke, really, but just a really serious rule of thumb.
Yeah, a riddle. More of a riddle.
Yeah. Did you make any comments at the beginning of this live stream saying, I just want to say this live stream is not funded by the Russians?
No. I will.
You should have. Dang it. Lost opportunity there.
Yeah. If you want to send me $1 million to say shit that I would have said anyway, I guess that if let's say there's a Russian military operation that would say that the Disney live action remake of the Dumbo, for example, sucks, and they funneled me like $1 million in black money for me to change my position, because otherwise it would have said that the remake of Dumbo was a fucking masterpiece. But since I got the money, I suddenly realized that the Dumbo remake that Tim Burton made was a piece of shit.
You heard it here first, folks. Loudmouth is in collusion with the Russians to say that Disney live-action remakes are shit.
Yes. A position I definitely would not have come up with on my own.
Imagine that. Oh, man. Thank goodness that nobody's actually trying to go that far and say that. Nobody is actually saying the only reason why people hate Disney is because they are bought off by XYZ bad actor.
Well, actually, someone did actually say that like Russian bots were behind the negative reaction to The Last Jedi, which obviously is bullshit. I'm not kidding. There was actually Disney shows who were actually saying that argument. Yeah, I don't think the Kremlin gives two shits whatsoever about The Last Jedi.
People are just that petty with their defense of media. Some people are just the biggest consumers of all time, to where that they'll say that almost literally everything is good except for maybe that which is given a rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Right, but beyond that, like every country's interest, as my 2 cents guy was saying, is it's geared towards theirs. For example, Russia's allied with China, but ultimately, China really doesn't care who controls Ukraine, and Russia really doesn't care much who rules Taiwan. But both will support each other on the matter because, of course, their mutual partnership is both within their national interest.
And that being against the United States?
Yes, that being against the United States.
Right.
If the Chinese Communist Party were to be able to take back Taiwan, Russia really wouldn't care that much, but they would be happy that China's happy, and they probably would provide it. I mean, I doubt they'd ever commit troops to it or anything, but they might provide China with aid on the matter.
Right.
Just like China has definitely provided Russia enormous monetary aid that's helped their war in Ukraine. But ultimately, the way that Russia's been able to survive U.S. sanctions is that China and India have avoided them and have been freely trading with Russia.
Yeah. Well, oh, noticed another live chat comment.
All right.
Oh, well, for me, I'm not that kind of a consumer. When the Pokemon anime took off my favorite character, Misty, I turned on supporting them. Speaking of, heard of what happened to Rachel, her voice actress? No.
Did she die recently?
I don't know.
I think she did. I may have misheard. I did hear about something happening to her. Never mind. I'm not talking about that.
Okay.
Um,
Maybe we should end this since we're kind of running out of stuff to talk about strictly relating to this. I mean, I guess we could talk about Alien Romulus and Deadpool and Wolverine, but I think you want to say that for strictly a movie review.
Yeah, I'd rather save that for strictly a movie stream. Though the short reviews both were decent. Unless the Russians want to pay me to hate them, because I will take their money, and then I will hate them. Just like with Lauren Chen in Israel.
Deadpool and Wolverine was better than most of what they made post Endgame, but still kind of overrated in my opinion.
Oh, definitely.
I will definitely go further in detail if we ever go on a stream talking about that.
Yeah, we can do that sometime. But I guess we'll end this one right here. So, in conclusion, fuck the Kremlin, fuck Lauren Chen, fuck the Chinese Communist Party, fuck Tim Pool, who else? Fuck Iran, fuck Hamas, fuck Hezbollah. Anything else? Anyone I missed?
I don't know. Fuck Trump.
Fuck Trump. Okay, fuck Trump as well, and fuck Kamala Harris to be bipartisan.
Yeah, fuck the Dems, as a Steamer the Steam Train said. Yeah, exactly, Steamer. And in my final saying, I gotta say, whoever wants to give me $1 million for my political commentary, hey, I won't change my beliefs, but you can go ahead and pay me if you want to.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.